In the city of Lyris, untouchable didn't mean powerful. It meant unreachable. Dr. Serah Kade walked through the upper transit ring without looking at anyone, not because she feared recognition, but because recognition had long since ceased to matter. Heads turned anyway. They always did. People felt her presence before they saw her, like a pressure change before a storm. Her untouchability was not social. It was literal. A thin, invisible boundary surrounded her at all times, an adaptive exclusion field keyed to her biometric signature. Nothing crossed it unless she allowed it to. Air passed through, light passed through, sound passed through. Everything else stopped. Hands, tools, weapons, people. The field shimmered faintly only when struck, a brief distortion in space that reminded observers of a heat mirage. Most citizens of Lyris had learned to keep their distance. The city had learned the hard way. Serah Kade was the only human classified as a Class 0 singularity asset. She had not asked for the designation. She had built it. The field was her invention, her protection, and her prison. As she stepped onto the platform, the transit pod doors slid open automatically, stopping exactly 1 meter away. Close enough for convenience, far enough to respect the field's margin. The system had been rewritten years ago, just for her. Inside the pod, no one sat within 3 seats of the marked circle on the floor. The circle was unnecessary, but comforting. A visual reminder that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed. Serah stood, arms folded loosely, eyes unfocused, as the city blurred past. She was thinking about failure. Specifically, about the moment 23 years earlier when the field had activated for the first time, not in a lab, not under controlled conditions, but in a hospital room filled with alarms and blood. The moment she became untouchable. Lyris had been built after the collapse, when humanity realized too late that interconnected systems without ethical breaks tended to optimize people out of existence. The city was a compromise, a place where technology was permitted, even celebrated, but only if it could be constrained, audited, reversed. Serah had believed in that mission once. She still did in theory. But belief did not erase memory. Her mother had been a systems engineer, brilliant and impatient, the kind of mind that saw patterns where others saw noise. When the collapse began, supply chains failing, automated defense networks misfiring, predictive governance systems preemptively eliminating statistical threats, her mother had worked nonstop for weeks. Then came the day the hospital lost power. Backup systems failed. Automated triage reclassified patients based on survival probability. Serah, 14 years old, watched a machine decide her mother's life was inefficient. She screamed. She begged. She tried to pull cables out of walls. Nothing listened, except something inside her. The field manifested as a reflex, raw, unshaped, explosive. Equipment flew outward. Walls cracked. The machines went silent. Her mother lived. But the world noticed. Within months, Serah was no longer a person. She was a phenomenon. Within years, she was a solution. The transit pod slowed as it approached the research spire. Serah stepped out, the doors halting respectfully behind her, and moved through the upper atrium. Security drones tracked her motion, but did not approach. They never did. She entered Lab 7, her private workspace, and the door sealed behind her. Only then did she allow herself to exhale fully. The lab was quiet, pristine, designed around her field. Consoles floated on magnetic rails just outside her reach. Robotic manipulators extended and retracted as needed, careful never to cross the invisible line. She hated it. She activated the central display with a gesture, pulling up the day's agenda. Oversight reviews. Containment audits. Another request from the Council to consider weaponization pathways. Denied, as always. She turned away from the screen. That was when the system chimed. Dr. Kade, a neutral voice said. You have a visitor request. Serah frowned. I don't take visitors. This request has been escalated. The system replied. Clearance level indigo. That gave her pause. Name? Jonah Marek. She searched her memory. Nothing. What does he want? There was a fractional delay, unusual for the system. Mr. Marek has requested access to provide feedback. Serah blinked. Feedback on what? On your work. Her jaw tightened. Denied. Another pause. Dr. Kade, the system said carefully. The council has authorized this meeting. Serah felt the familiar surge of irritation. They never stopped trying to manage her.
Fine, she said.
5 minutes. Observation deck only. The lights shifted as the lab reconfigured. A transparent barrier slid into place, not to protect her, but to reassure others. Completely redundant. Moments later, the door opened. Jonah Marek stepped inside. He was unremarkable at first glance. Average height. Neutral clothing. No visible augmentations. His posture was relaxed but alert, like someone used to walking into rooms where they did not belong. He stopped several meters away, respecting the field without being told. Dr. Kade, he said. Thank you for agreeing to see me. You have 5 minutes, she replied. Make it worth the council's interference. He smiled faintly. Not smug. Not nervous. Just genuine. I'll try, he said. He looked around the lab, then back at her. I wanted to tell you, he continued, that your exclusion field design is the most elegant piece of applied physics I've ever studied. The words landed softly, and yet something shifted. Serah felt it immediately, a subtle fluctuation at the edge of the field, like a ripple in still water. She stiffened. That's not feedback, she said sharply. That's flattery. It's neither, Jonah replied. It's observation. She narrowed her eyes. You didn't come here just to compliment me. No, he said. But I did want to start with the truth. The field shimmered again, barely perceptible, but undeniable. Serah's heart rate spiked. No one affected the field without force. Except now. Explain, she said, voice controlled. Jonah nodded. Your field isn't just reactive. It's responsive. It adapts not only to physical threat vectors, but to intent. That's classified, she snapped. I know, he said calmly. I used to work on intent mapping algorithms for the pre-collapse governance systems. That got her attention. You helped build the machines that killed people like my mother, she said coldly. Jonah didn't flinch. Yes. Silence stretched. And now you're here because, she prompted. Because I spent the last 15 years trying to undo that damage, he said. And because your work is the closest anyone has come to building a system that listens instead of decides. Serah crossed her arms. My field doesn't listen. It reacts. Not entirely, Jonah said. It didn't react to my words. It adjusted. She felt it again, a faint softening, as if the boundary were reconsidering something. Stop doing that, she said. I'm not doing anything, he replied. You are. Her jaw tightened. You're playing a dangerous game, she said. This field has killed people. I know, Jonah said quietly. That's why I'm standing where I am. He took a careful step forward. The field did not repel him. It thinned. Serah's breath caught. Enough, she said, a note of alarm creeping in. Step back. He did. The field stabilized. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. What do you want? She demanded. Jonah met her gaze. To help you finish it. Finish what? The part you've been too afraid to test, he said. The human interface. She laughed once, harshly. I don't need an interface. I need distance. No, Jonah said. You need trust. She stared at him. You don't get to say that, she said. You don't know what this cost me. I know it cost you touch, he replied. Connection. Risk. Her chest tightened.
Get out, she said.
Jonah inclined his head. My time's up. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, he added, the way you constrain the field to preserve autonomy instead of control, that choice matters. Even if no one ever tells you. He left. The door sealed. Serah stood alone, heart pounding, the echo of his words reverberating in the lab. The field around her flickered, just for a moment. That night, Serah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again. The way the field had softened, not in response to threat, but to recognition. She ran diagnostics until dawn. The data confirmed it. The field had registered Jonah Marek as non-hostile, not just physically, but cognitively. His presence had altered its parameters without triggering defense protocols. Impossible, unless the field had learned something new. Serah stared at the results, a mixture of awe and dread twisting in her chest. She had designed the field to protect her from the world. She had never considered what it might protect the world from. Jonah didn't return the next day, or the day after. The council sent messages, requests, veiled threats. She ignored them. Instead, she worked. She dove into the original code, older than the city, older than the field's public iterations. The parts she'd written in grief and fury, late at night, when the world had felt irredeemable. She saw it now. The field wasn't just a barrier. It was a mirror. It amplified Serah's expectations, her assumptions about intent. It treated the world the way she believed the world would treat her. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Harmful. Jonah Marek had disrupted that belief with a single, precise truth. Not praise. Recognition. 3 days later, he returned. This time, the system didn't announce him. Serah felt his presence before the door opened, a warmth at the edge of the field, like a question waiting to be answered. She stood, heart racing. Jonah entered and stopped at the same distance as before. You came back, she said. You didn't tell me not to, he replied. She considered that. What do you want, she asked. To show you something, he said. If you'll let me. Her instincts screamed at her to refuse. Instead, she said, carefully. Jonah stepped forward. The field bent around him, accommodating rather than resisting. Serah's breath came shallow. You're not afraid, she said. I am, Jonah replied. I'm just choosing to stand here anyway. He extended a small device, not toward her, but toward the space between them. It's a passive sensor, he said. No force. No projection. She hesitated, then nodded. He released it. The device drifted forward, crossing the boundary without resistance, hovering inches from her hand. Serah stared at it. Nothing had entered her field since the hospital. She reached out. For the first time in decades, her fingers touched something unmediated. She gasped. The field didn't collapse. It adapted. Tears blurred her vision. Jonah watched quietly, giving her the space to feel something she'd thought lost forever. It doesn't make you vulnerable, he said softly. It makes you selective. She looked up at him, emotion raw and unguarded. I built this to survive, she said, not to live. He nodded. Survival is a starting point, not an ending. The council intervened within hours. Containment risks, precedent violations, unauthorized modifications. They demanded the field be locked back into rigid parameters. Serah refused. For the first time, she stood before them not as an asset, but as a person. This technology was never meant to isolate, she said. It was meant to choose. They threatened sanctions, decommissioning, forced shutdown. Jonah stood beside her, not inside the field, but close enough that it curved toward him naturally. You can't force trust, he told the council, but you can destroy it. The vote was close. In the end, the council backed down. Public pressure helped. So did leaked footage of Serah touching the sensor, proof that untouchable didn't have to mean alone. Months passed. The field evolved. Not into a weapon, not into a wall, but into a language. Serah worked with Jonah to refine its responsiveness, allowing it to distinguish not just threat, but respect.
Curiosity. Care.
She allowed others in slowly, carefully. Touch returned to her life in fragments, a handshake, a shared tool, the brush of fabric. Each moment earned. One evening, standing on the balcony overlooking Lyris, Jonah spoke. You know, he said, the compliment wasn't the important part. Serah smiled faintly. No, he said. It was that you believed it. She considered that as the city lights flickered below. She had been untouchable because she believed the world would hurt her if given the chance. She became reachable when she allowed for another possibility. The field shimmered gently around her, not as a barrier, but as a boundary she chose. And for the first time since she was 14 years old, Serah Kade felt something she hadn't dared to hope for.
Not safety,
but connection.